In 1986, during the midst of the Cold War, Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons created the culture phenomenon known as Watchmen, a gritty, deconstructionist, commentational comic series which sought to question the morality in politics at the time. Over the years, Watchmen has been adapted into other media forms. Warner Bros. 2008 animated comic series Watchmen motion comic, Zack Snyder's 2009 film Watchmen, and more recently HBO's 2020 inspired series Watchmen.
I mean, we took the standard Batman image, the person who is compulsively dedicated to eradicating crime, and thinking about that in the real world, it seems that such a person would probably be a lonely, paranoid vigilante. He'd probably have terrible hygiene habits, no friends. This seemed to be a more feasible reality rather than living in a mansion and having a sumptuous Batcave.
Moore's maxi-series has been regarded by many as one of the first literary pieces grounded in postmodernism commentary on superheroes. As shown in the interview, the sort of contemporary lens Moore lays on top of the novel sort of help grounds us in the reality of the world The Watchmen is based in, a world in which superheroes are merely just caped crusaders who are all severely flawed and haunted by their own traumas. Moore wanted to break down piece by piece the superhero trope and expand upon the human inside of the suit, by placing a what-if emphasis on the traits of some of our beloved superheroes. What if Batman took his vigilante view to an extreme? What if Superman had no compassion towards humanity? And what if Captain America was cynical and selfish? By deconstructing each superhero archetype, Morris and Gibbons reconstructed a complex, morally diverse group of characters, one of them being Rorschach.
October 12th, 1985. Dog carcass in alley this morning. Tire tread on burst stomach. This city's afraid of me. I've seen its true face. The streets are extended gutters, and the gutters are full of blood. And when the drains finally scab over, all the vermin will drown.
Walter Kovacs, or as he's introduced to us as Rorschach, is a masked vigilante who at the beginning of the book is investigating the murder of Edward Blake, the comedian. He's who Morris decides as our main protagonist. Rorschach serves to be our visual vessel for most of the chapters in the book. So, as the first chapter progresses, we're quickly given clues about Rorschach's obsessive, morally unambiguous philosophy on crime and justice. In the postmodern 20th century sense, he's a deconstruction of Batman, a masked vigilante who views the world around him as corrupt while operating strictly on his own superior moral code. However, we need to keep in mind that Watchmen was not created during the time of Christopher Nolan's postmodernism renaissance of Batman that we all associate with Batman now. As Sulin Polo puts it, the Batman of the early 80s was darker than his 1960s counterpart. Rorschach owes his ideals, his visual design, and his penchant for violence to a couple of other characters who were doing the late 80s Batman thing way before Batman, namely the vigilante detectives known as The Question and Mr. A. Mr. A was a vigilante who appeared in the anthology series created by Steve Ditko in the late 1960s. His design consisted of a monochromatic suit, fedora, and a steel mask. While fighting crime, he operated on the belief that morality had no room for ambiguity. Like his calling card, he only saw the world through a black and white lens. Later on, Ditko created another character who drew inspiration from Mr. A, called The Question. You're starting to see the resemblance. And while The Question shares an uncanny amount of costume similarities with the walking ink block test, his similarities end there. It's really Mr. A that Moore drew his inspiration from for Rorschach's philosophy and personality. Rorschach is a satirical take on Mr. A, as Sulu Poland states. He never intended Rorschach to be a laudable hero, only a laughable one. And we can see this sort of satirical take through how Rorschach interacts with the world, how his trauma-ridden past has caused him to refuse to view humanity through a forgiving light. Through his disgust of humanity, he crafts his own identity for himself, one where he believes, through subjecting the world to his moral standards, can he and only he be worthy of being the jury, the judge, and the executioner. But, as the comic continues, we see how the world views Rorschach. Before he's sent to jail, he's beaten up by the cops who view him no more powerful as them. His superiority complex is no greater a shield for him than the mask that gets ripped off at the end of the confrontation. Similar to Mr. A in Batman, he dons no superhuman abilities, just a broken psyche and a lot of pent-up issues. The birth of Rorschach's identity and the death of Kovacs morbidly parallel his mask perfectly. Every single ink blot on his mask changes shape to visually illustrate the sort of stained Kantian philosophy he carries. And each black blot are fragments of his reflection, his persona, his past. In Peter Hegarty's 2017 article, Rorschach Test and Rorschach Vigilantes, querying the history of psychology in Watchmen, Hegarty goes into depth about the history of the Rorschach test and its significance with it being a symbol Rorschach wears. In summary, the ink block test was introduced by Herman Rorschach in 1921 in his book Psychodeconstructing, as a sort of test of association of events, relating novel memories with those in the past. As years went by, the Rorschach test became more popularized and redefined. In the beginning of World War II, it was used in order to detect gay men in the military. Later on, as time progressed, the ink block test lost its popularity due to its invalidity in psychology, and as Hegarty puts it, Moore and Gibbons wanted to illustrate how the Rorschach both metaphorically and literally bleeds in and out of pulp culture. Likewise to the inkblot's descent from popularity due to its inaccuracy, Rorschach, the character himself, paralleled in his own descent from being confident in his own morals to going to the extremes to die for them, due to being so disillusioned and in denial to accept that his own beliefs were broken.
What are you waiting for? Do it. Do it!
The influential legacy Watchmen has left behind is one that should be acknowledged. Not only did Moore and Gibbons' masterpiece give way to a new era of grittier, postmodernist comics, but it also helped establish the popularization of the satirical deconstructionist genre, whether it be movies, TV shows, or limited series. And in Gibbons' words, I leave this.
The only way we could have done Watchmen was if we loved superheroes. If we despised them, it wouldn't have been a good book. It wouldn't have been an interesting story. It wouldn't have been as popular a story. We were kind of celebrating superheroes.